Sarah Stockdale,
Hello.
welcome to the podcast. I've been forever fascinated by people and their journeys to success, and I think there will always be this sense of getting behind the curtain to discover what it really takes to invent a brand and be authentic, and I think you've done that. So I guess my first question, I'll start with this, was when did you think that maybe an entrepreneurial life was for you?
So I've spent my entire career working at startups and watching kind of other entrepreneurs bring their ideas to life and being kind of a muscle that helps them do that in the background. So I was always kind of playing that supporting role to other people's dreams. And at a certain point, you just think like, I could probably do that for myself. Like I have some ideas. I know the way I want to build a community and run a company, and it's hard to do that when it's not yours. So part of it was the type A control freak in me that just wanted, like, I was like, I want to be able to make the choices. And then having some ideas and some excitement around those ideas and wanting to kind of see them in the world.
I know that you're from Dorchester, so that's a pretty small place now, near London, I guess, or Ingersoll in
Yep.
Ontario. Um, and so, growing up in that kind of environment, did you see yourself as an entrepreneur, or did you have plans at a young age that this was something you're going to do, or were your sights set on other things?
Not at all. So I had never known anyone who started their own business. Both of my parents worked for the government. My father is a firefighter and my mom is a social worker. So very like traditional, stable pension style work environments. And honestly, my dream was to be an on-air journalist. So when I was a kid growing up, I kind of chose my university path to end up at Ryerson to take a master's of journalism, which I didn't end up doing. Learned too much about the news world and decided that it wasn't for me. So I always kind of had I had aspirations of kind of leading a big life and trying to see kind of my dreams realized, but I never saw that manifesting as me having my own company. I never aspired to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everybody has this idea that when you grow up in a smaller town, that there's this narrative of like wanting to get out of that small environment and do big things. And as I thought about having you on the show, I thought, well, I get the sense that Sarah is the type of person who probably knew at a young age. I'm always fascinated by people who kind of know at a young age what they want to do. So it's kind of nice to hear that maybe that it evolved with you. It was something that that kind of took hold of you as you kind of chose different paths. But did you have a mentor when you were coming up that really kind of opened your mind, expanded your mind to things, and changed your life trajectory?
Yes, I think one of the things that I did when I was younger and in university that I'm grateful for my past self for doing was kind of curating. I call them friend tours, so like mentors who are also friends. Because the formal mentor-mentee relationship I never really got. I wanted something a little bit more social. So I did see a whole bunch of different paths of folks who were really successful, but also just inspiring in the different ways that they led their lives. So, um, and I got to work for people who were super entrepreneurial and kind of watch the trajectory of companies, which because I was working at kind of Silicon Valley backed venture funded companies, it's a really interesting kind of roller coaster of how those companies are built and then raise money and then hire tons of people at once and then have to fire half of them most of the time. So it was, I got to kind of get that core advice and inspiration from the friend tours that I curated, but then also watch my bosses kind of go through all the challenges of building a business.
There's so much risk when I think about startups. I just think about all I can see is risk, and how do you manage that? If I mean, these are businesses that you've been involved in, and as you say, they can blow up and take off, and they're very volatile. What are you? Would you say in your life you've kind of got a good threshold for risk? Is that something that has to be innate, or do you get used to it after a while?
I have almost no threshold for risk. I am super safe. I like to, I don't like to make kind of crazy rash decisions. And we had these things at work where I'd always be pushed by my bosses and my mentors to be like, here's a ton of money, figure out what to do with it. And I'm like, I don't need that much money. I'm just going to do these little things. And they're like, no, 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 no. We want to see you take these big bets. But I never got comfortable with that amount of risk. So when I built my own business, I wanted to do it in a sustainable way. So I wanted to be profitable from day one. I didn't want to raise any money. I wanted to fully bootstrap it, and hire intentionally at the right moments that made sense. And I'm okay with it being a little bit slower. And I've got all these people in my life who are like, raise money, go faster. How can we just make this bigger? And I'm like, I want it to be big, but I want it to be done my way, not the Silicon Valley way. But really, entrepreneurship, you get comfortable standing on the edge of a cliff. Like that is what you're doing every day. So when coronavirus happened, everyone is now feeling like they're standing on the edge of a cliff. And I feel like I've at least got some practice doing that and feeling comfortable with that. So it's my risk tolerance is relatively low, but I guess it's quite higher than the regular person now just because of practice.
Well, let's talk about. I watched your talk on creative mornings, and I thought it was really fascinating, the lonely genius narrative. And here we are talking about you know risk taking, but growing a business, and everybody has this I guess their own narrative or how they see themselves. You raised such an interesting point with the lonely genius, and how it really takes a number of people to make a success happen. It's not about being alone or singular in the whole thing. So would you say that's been your approach in your success too? And how do you avoid this idea of the lonely genius? Maybe someone looking at you and sort of going, well, she must do it all.
I think and the problem is like this narrative of like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg being like this individual creative genius that was able to, build this $1 billion company. Like after being on the inside of companies like that, I find that hilarious
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many people, there's so much work, there's so much support to make literally anything happen. Like individuals can make only a very small amount happen on their own. And I think anyone who thinks that even my company or where I am today happened with just me, I think that's hilarious because I see even when I launch a product, we launched our first online course a month ago, and I was just blown away by how the community came out and supported that for me. And I was so grateful to have collective help, to have kind of my network come out and help me kind of promote it and help me get the word out. And without that, it would not have done what it did. And I'm so very aware of the fact that like I personally only have so much power and influence, and bandwidth. So like the Elon Musk is a lonely genius is to me, I'm like, he has great government contracts and really smart engineers. Like that is why he is successful. He has a huge ego and a whole bunch of people managing that ego. And that is the only reason why this is even a little bit working. And on anyone on their own can't do that. But those people specifically that we always talk about being these creative geniuses had an immense amount of privilege also structurally that enabled their success. So they went to Ivy League institutions, their families had a lot of money and a lot of power and connections. It's really hard to get in front of venture capitalists. It's really hard to raise money. Those things require a network. So every kind of stage of their success was enabled by other people. And I think we have to kind of tell that whole story.
Why do you think psychologically people will perpetuate that? I mean, I think in some cases you'll have very successful people who might, if you ask them, would say, "No, it takes a village," and I had a lot of help, and thank God I was born into a situation that gave me advantages that maybe others didn't. But there's also the other side. There's the audience side. Like, I feel like social media really doesn't help that either. I think everyone kind of projects this image, and arguably they could be guilty of perpetuating something that's not necessarily true. I don't know how you feel about it, but I can't see social media being helpful. There's also seems to be this appetite for this narrative of the lone wolf.
Hmm. I think we're fed a lot of the time a story of meritocracy. So like my hard work is the only ingredient to my success. And that kind of puts a lot of pressure on the individual, but that's like it's everywhere. That's the hero's journey. That's, you know, every founder's story. So I think despite it being kind of a toxic lie, we are still all breathing that air. We're breathing the air of the hero's journey and the, you know, the founder's journey. Um, and it kind of makes us all feel better, right? There's the structural privilege that only some people have access to, but if we all think that it's only our hard work, then the people who succeed are able to say like, look, it's me. And the people who are still kind of struggling and trying are also putting all that pressure on themselves. And I think that, you know, it's the air it's how capitalism works, but it's something that I think we need to examine quite a bit more, because not everyone has access to those structures and those privileges, and we need to kind of dismantle those systems in order to make it easier for everyone to realize their own dreams and have the resources to do so.
There's another quote that you had in your talk, which I absolutely loved, which was, if you can make everyone around you better, you'll always have a job. But you prefaced it by a little story about one of your employers coming to you and asking you to help someone that you felt maybe would make it more competitive for you in terms of your own promotion. So how do you balance that? How do you balance this idea of a healthy competitiveness, but still being seen as someone who's benevolent or benevolent coworker or leader? How do you do that effectively?
Yeah, I think like my past self, like when I was in my early 20s working at early stage startups, especially being one of the only women there, I saw myself in direct competition with everyone. And that was actually a detriment to my career. It actually put me back a little bit in terms of leadership, because that is like the opposite definition of leadership. People who are able to help level everyone up around them, that is what a leader looks like. And so I think there's some healthiness in the competitiveness. It does push you and make you better. But I think sometimes we stop at like the first thought we have. So like we see someone else succeeding and we think, I'm jealous of that, or I want that, or I wish I could do that, or I'm upset that they succeeded and I didn't. And that's kind of that like knee-jerk human thought. But I'm always like, okay, knee-jerk human thought, go away. What is the second thought that you choose? And for me, that's always admiration. So like I see someone do something incredible, or write a book that I wish I had written, or start a company that I wish I had started. First thought, kind of jealousy, competitiveness. Second thought that I choose is the admiration. What is it? Why is this jealousy coming up? Why is this competitiveness coming up? What does it indicate that I admire about this person? And how do I take that and build that into my own life? So I like to think of it as I'm not in direct competition with anyone. There's enough for all of us. There's an abundance of opportunity and power. But if I get that kind of feeling of jealousy, it's an indication of something that I have to do differently in my own life. I have to work harder, or I have to kind of start the company that's been in the back of my mind because somebody else did it. So I think there's a healthy competitiveness, but you should have it with yourself, and not in direct opposition to the people in your life.
How do you deal with impatience when it comes to being an entrepreneur? Because I think it's safe to say that society becomes more and more impatient. We want results now. There's that old 5 minute abs joke and stuff like that. But you must come across this. I mean, every startup has its obstacles, and what must be wrapped up in that is a great deal of patience and being able to stick to your plan and not freak out when you get hit with adversity, which I imagine might happen day one.
Yeah.
So, what's your advice to other entrepreneurs as it relates to that?
I read a book once and they talked about how it was a comedian that came out with a Netflix special, and it did really, really well. And they were like, the overnight success. And she was like, 22 years of like grinding in crappy comedy clubs, and I'm an overnight success. So like, there is no such thing as quick success. Like nothing. Like no, everyone's always like, oh, just do this, it'll be fast. No. 4-hour work week. Like I just don't buy it. Anything that's worth doing takes a lot of time and effort, and there's a compounding growth effect. So like I work in growth marketing, and the things that you focus on over time grow. So there's no like quick fix. There's no hack. That's why I hate the term growth hacking. There's a compounding growth effect of everything. So the small things that you do every day in your business are going to have a long-term effect on how you can grow and how you can become kind of the business that you're looking to become. So I kind of laugh at that. I'm an extremely impatient person. I want everything to happen right now. I'm sure working for me is a bit of a pain in the butt. But I do believe in, the work. It's very much like farming. Like you're not going to see anything for a really long time, but you have to believe that it's happening, because you are putting in that effort. So if you're feeling impatient, just keep going.
Yeah.
Just don't stop doing it, because then you're going to miss out on all the seeds that have started to sprout.
What do you make about this idea of work-life balance? I think there's a lot of people who look at successful people and they think, wow, they probably are making sacrifices when it comes to maybe their relationships or just their own personal time. Is there I mean, I had Mitch Joel on recently. He's one to say he doesn't even believe in work-life balance. What's your position on all that? Can you be successful and also not sacrifice everything in the pursuit of it?
Mm-hmm. I think I used to subscribe to that, like work life integration, always be work. And then I burnt out really hard. I got really, really sick after a company that I was working for was acquired by Airbnb. And I was like a bit of a zombie for a couple of months, just because burnout is a real thing. And if you decide to grind for a period of time, if you're like, for these 4 months, I'm going to grind, you only have so much bandwidth. You can't pour from an empty cup. So you will have 2 months where you're useless after that. So I don't believe that you can sacrifice your personal time, your, exercise, health, relationships, in the pursuit of work, because then you're just going to have those periods of time where you're no longer useful. So I'm trying, and I'm like a recovering workaholic. I'm still like, I relapse often, but I am trying to kind of listen to my body a bit better, because I know how it feels to be burnt out, and it takes about a year to recover. And it's not worth it. So I think anyone who's telling you like that hustle mentality, that kind of like hustle narrative, I think it's bullshit. Because yes, you can hustle for this period of time, but then you just spread your hustle over a longer period of time. Give yourself breaks, listen to your body, and you're not going to have those periods where you're just a complete zombie.
Yeah, so we've talked about patience and we've talked a little bit about balance here. Um, let's talk about your growth marketing business because I imagine those two things play into that. People are looking for the growth and effective ways to grow, but there's patience that comes with it. But I feel like I need to start by kind of going, let's pretend that I know nothing about growth marketing, and then not pretend because I literally don't. Can you give us a crash a crash course on how you would define growth marketing?
Mm-hmm. So I would define growth marketing as kind of an evolution of traditional marketing. It sits at the intersection of data, product, and traditional marketing. So really where traditional marketers would focus on kind of sitting in boardrooms and coming up with campaigns that they would then put out to their customers and then receive feedback, we kind of shorten that cycle. So it's much more experimental. We have a hypothesis about a way that we could potentially grow. We lean test that experiment as quickly as possible without a lot of resources. We get immediate feedback and data, and then we use that data to make the decision of what to do next. So it's kind of putting like a grade 10 scientific biology hypothesis driven part of marketing in. But really it started in kind of San Francisco with tech companies, because you're going up against behemoth incumbents with tons of money and huge teams. How are you going to scrappily figure out ways to maybe not even beat them, but at least kind of eat a little bit of their cake? So So it's a lot. It's such a fun, um, very kind of analytical and data driven, but also incredibly creative version of marketing.
Yeah, I'd love to get your perspective on traditional media, because I feel like traditional media has been on life support for a while, or that maybe digital media is something that everyone sees as overtaking all things traditional. Do you still see a place for traditional, or is it just the way in which we use it, or if are we just still stuck in this old way of thinking how it should work when it comes to traditional?
I think when it comes to traditional media, like if you're thinking of like TV and billboards and traditional print ads, like there's still a place for those things. What I struggle with is measuring their impact for a company. So with digital, you can say this person saw this ad, click this link, made this purchase. Like I can follow that entire path through. If someone sees a billboard as they're driving by, for me, that's a lot harder to control whether or not that's had an impact on their purchasing path. So I still think that there's some super interesting things that you can do with offline where you like geolocate an area, you put the billboards there, you don't do anything else, you see if it has an impact. So, smart growth marketers have gotten intelligent about how to measure traditional media, even though it is a little bit harder than digital. For me, I think like I like to take a perfect storm approach. If you're like launching a brand, I want for a period of time in a specific location for you to see that logo everywhere. So traditional media does help with that. It's just harder to measure and tends to be a lot more expensive in terms of return on investment for companies.
Yeah, do you see that media, like particularly media as it relates to digital, we did see with traditional astronomical cost to play in that world. You still see big brands, big visible brands using it and still paying for it. I mean, I don't know how much a Super Bowl ad still costs, but I imagine it's astronomical.
Yeah.
Um, but I know more and more budgets go towards the digital side year after year, huge amounts of growth. And do you feel like we'll get there one day where an Instagram sponsored post is going to be uh, considerably more expensive than maybe it is still right now?
I think that's already happened. So I was part of the first wave when Instagram decided to start allowing advertisers. So the company that I was working for at the time was part of Instagram's beta program. And it was incredibly inexpensive. It wasn't that effective because their ad platforms were a bit of a mess, but they're much better now. But it's already gotten exponentially more expensive since launch, and it will continue as markets kind of saturate. Um, and it's becoming easier and easier to start a company online. So like Shopify has made it incredibly easy to start an e-commerce store. So that's going to drive a whole bunch of competition in the digital ad space. So people are going to, every time something gets, a tool gets saturated, we have to get really creative on what the next thing is until that gets saturated. So there's kind of like a plateau effect with all growth channels, and digital marketing is included in that. We work with super smart advertising folks, so they're like just ahead of that curve. But people are catching up all the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you see how many brands have really embraced it and are going there now. Um, I'm interested to know about the way in which we try to persuade people right now. If if the data tells us that we already know what they want, then how does that affect our messaging, and what about persuasion? I think in mass media you saw this idea of inventing desire out of nowhere,
Mhm.
and sparking some kind of interest out of nowhere. Whereas now it seems as though, I don't know if these devices we're on right now are listening, but it does feel as
Yeah.
though it does feel as though just through conversation I'm going to know kind of where what you want. And what does that do for the art of persuasion anymore? Is it just about finding someone who's at the right place at the right time and shoving what they want in front of them?
Think it's a little bit of both. So if I go and add something to my cart, I'm getting retargeted with that exact item because there is intent there. I've intended to make that purchase. I just haven't gone through with it yet. So if I was that digital marketing manager, I'd be following that person around the internet until they made that purchase. But there is also, good marketers are able to tell a story. So they're able to kind of figure out where that pain is, where that problem is, or where that intention to purchase something is, and bring that customer psychology piece into it. Um, it's funny because as our tools get more sophisticated in terms of following people around the internet and optimizing for where in their purchasing journey they are, when to show them specific messages, what gets really interesting in my world is the people who are incredibly empathetic, who have high emotional intelligence, who can really understand customers and their psychology and their stories. Machines can't do that. Not yet. Machines can't write that copy, build that creative, and tell those stories. So, as these tools can perform a lot of the analytical, muscle for us, what gets more and more important is our ability to connect with humans. Because that is the one place where the machines can't yet out optimize us. So when in GrowClass, which is our online growth marketing course, there's a kind of a whole module around customer psychology and interviewing customers, integrating customers into your process, so you can get those kind of deep empathy proof points. And then we have an entire module on conversion copywriting. So how do you get really, really good at telling those stories and connecting with people? Because that, I think, is those skills are going to be much more important as our machines are able to do everything else for us.
Yeah, what's your stance on privacy? I mean, I feel like the world is becoming less and less private. I know some people have. There seems to be two people out there. One person who thinks, well, I don't have anything to hide, and I don't mind someone presenting me with something that I might want whenever.
Mm-hmm.
Building a profile, a digital profile out there of both of us somewhere. It's probably, um, you know, very extensive. And then other people who are quite afraid of it. I'm one of the few people who doesn't have a little sticky over the camera of my
Please do.
yeah yeah. So I'm giving up too much
Everyone
privacy.
does.
What do you think as the kind of the privacy issue seems to be getting more and more intense? What do you think about that? And what about the self governance of these big providers like the Zuckerbergs of the world?
Oh man, you've opened up a can.
I know I was going to bring up that
I
name.
apologize. You probably can see it on my face. So there's an incredible book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism that's kind of informed a lot of what I believe. I worked for a company called Delphia as a consultant, which was a really, really interesting company around data. And they have, incredibly smart data scientists working there. And I've had a lot of these conversations about, that myth of they're just using my information to send me better ads. Sure.
Mhm.
But isn't that a very unimaginative way to use your information? If you know everything about a person, and you have access to supercomputers, there is much more that you can do with that information than just serve them ads. So when it comes to kind of privacy, I have like fear around surveillance, because the people who, you know, tend to be, when we're looking at facial recognition technology, marginalized people get misidentified far more than the white folks, which causes huge potential for policing to get even worse than it is now, when it comes to building data profiles of individuals. um, Facebook has a supercomputer. So you fed, all of your personal information, and people are saying, I have nothing to hide. It's not necessarily that you should be worried that you have something to hide. It's more that you should be worried that Facebook also has demographic and psychographic data and kind of purchasing habits, credit card state, like every kind of piece of data, not just from you, but from everyone who fits kind of your persona, your demographic persona. And then they feed that information into a supercomputer, and that supercomputer is now predicting your future behavior. So Facebook knows whether or not I'm going to gain 5 pounds. They probably have a prediction on whether or not I'm going to get divorced. And that informs their algorithms, and their algorithms inform what I see in the present. So what I worry about with those companies is not, are they influencing whether or not I buy a t-shirt on Instagram? Because yes, they definitely are. but are they curating my content based on a prediction that they've made about my life, and then is that potentially coming true because they've predicted it? So it's it's a can of worms. But I have mostly a lot of kind of challenge and fear around Facebook specifically.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't know what the most diabolical thing that you've heard in terms of using that information. I think it seems as though, like on a base level, um, it's kind of like when someone designs a menu and they put they put the food that's going to go bad soon in the special box, and all of a sudden you're eating what they want you to eat. Um, it sounds as though that's what you're kind of alluding to when you get into the personal things. You know, maybe you're headed for a divorce or you're gaining weight or something. And now this whole idea of free will comes into play. Like, am I being manipulated such that I'm going to make decisions that they want me to make? So
And
it's,
we probably already are, right?
yeah.
Depending, because 30% of our lives are spent in these devices, and the information that we're seeing is by these algorithms that already have these predictions about us. So it's I gave a talk in Ottawa to a bunch of uh, not politicians, but policymakers, and I did my best to scare them a little bit, because I think when someone says to me, "Well, my 30-year-old daughter already like deleted her Facebook account, so I'm not worried," that is the tip of a very big iceberg that we're not aware of.
Yeah, it does seem like the Wild West, and that the rules are being kind of created as we go here. Um, I want to just switch gears here a little bit because you're a self-described feminist, and I know that that can be a polarizing subject for some people. At the same time, I think feminism still wears a definition that could be old or tired or needs to evolve. Is there such a thing as the new feminist?
Well, I like the term feminism. I wear it as a badge of honor. I think anyone who is still kind of in concerned with their opinions, and I hope that they educate themselves. But I do think that new feminism needs to be inclusive of more ideas than just white ladies. So like 80s feminism really didn't marginalized voices, and people of kind of different backgrounds. So my version of feminism is intersectional feminism that's led by the people who are experiencing inequality. And I am not that person. I operate in an immense space of privilege. Um, so I think I'm listening a lot more to kind of marginalized feminists, um, and trying to just take my cues from the people who are experiencing the most inequality. Whereas maybe old traditional feminism wasn't necessarily integrating all of the voices that we need to be hearing. Um, and that's my version of feminism is much more kind of integrated, and for me a lot of that is just education and learning. Like, I'm on a learning journey. I'm imperfect. I'm going to make mistakes, and I just want to continue to get better, and bring people along with me. So like, we're all on our own kind of learning curves when it comes to this stuff, and my job is to help educate um, other women and other kind of people of all genders, and try to bring them on board with this whole intersectional equality thing.
I ask all the guests if there is someone who is looking to emulate what you've done. What are the key pieces of advice that you would give them if they wanted to follow in your footsteps?
Be really good to people. Like, I think a lot of the time folks misinterpret and I I still kind of shy away from thinking of myself as a successful person, because I see myself at a point on a journey that is going to take a long time. But I do think people don't see all the behind the scenes things that happen in order to make someone successful. So if you think that it is all about you, that mindset has to shift, because it really is a collective effort. Um, build your network, invest in relationships with people, work incredibly hard at the thing that you want to be great at, and don't try to don't you know don't try to fake something that you haven't put enough effort into. Put the effort in, be good to humans, and start like half the people that I know that are just brilliant and have the ability to put cool things out into the world. The starting part is the hardest. Just do it. Like in 5 years, you're gonna wish that you had started now. So just do that now.
What are you looking forward to right now? What's next for you? What are you hyper focused on currently?
So we've built, we took kind of an in-person course that we were building for marketers and entrepreneurs to help them learn how to grow their businesses, and we brought that online. We've got our first 2 cohorts of our online course running, and it's awesome. So really, I'm hyper focused on helping them be successful, the folks that are in our program, and then building kind of what we're thinking of the future of community-based education. So that's our focus, one tiny step at a time. But yeah, we're launching another program in early August. So we're kind of focused on making the folks in our current cohort successful, and then looking to the future of how we can help more people.
That's awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Got to learn a little bit about growth marketing, and also get really scared about security and technology. Yeah, I'm gonna go have a drink, although I'll wait for them to tell me what kind of drink to have. This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France.